I've had the opportunity to take a multi-ethnic group of pastors, Asian and Latino, and when they see Jews who look like them from literally all over the world, it is always it always takes them aback, right? It's always fascinating when they see it. It's like an America here in the Middle East, all these different ethnicities, different groups represented here in a democracy living together. It's a very, very powerful image to them.
Ahlan wa sahlan, shalom from the middle of Jerusalem. I'm Dan Diker with my co-host Khaled Abu Toameh. This is Our Middle East, Al-Shaq Al-Awsat Lana. And we have a lot to talk about today. We have a very esteemed guest, Pastor Dumisani Washington, one of the great leaders in the Black American community. And today's discussion is going to be the intense and tense relationship between Israel and the American Black community. What a long and storied relationship, Pastor Dumisani, between Israel and the Black American community, both on the positive side and the negative side. On the positive side, Martin Luther King, the great Dr. Martin Luther King, Reverend Martin Luther King, was a Zionist and very much a supporter of Israel. Israel is a supporter of the Southern leadership, the SLCC, right? The Southern Christian Leadership Conference.
Absolutely,
that's right.
Yes, sir.
And Ralph Abernathy and all of his esteemed colleagues. On the other hand, you have a long and storied relationship between Yasser Arafat and Stokely Carmichael and the NCC, SNCC, and the more radical streams in the Black American community. Help us create a little bit of context about where we stand today, because the relationship today is very troubled between the Black American community and Israel.
There are a lot of stressors that are there, Dan, and that's a good starting point when you're going to Dr. King and the Civil Rights Movement. You're talking about the 1960s, apparently, obviously, post-67 war. And then that prelude leading up to the 73 war, those tectonic shifts that were happening here in the Middle East were also going on there in the United States. And when it came to Black support for Israel, even the Black and Jewish synergy in the United States in terms of the civil rights movement, even before then with Booker T. Washington and Julius Rosenwald, all of those things become very, very focused on by, among other things, Yasser Arafat's role with the PLO. Ironically, Dr. King is assassinated in 1968. Yasser Arafat becomes president of the PLO in 69. And chairman, yes, sir, chairman of the PLO in 69. And one of the first things on his agenda is to reach out to the younger, more militant, even in their term, portion of the Black civil rights community, which would include people like you said, Stokely Carmichael, Eldridge Cleaver of the Black Panthers, and so on. And you had an exploitation of that whole dichotomy there, right? So you had much of the older guard, and Dr. King, I say older guard, he was 39 when he was assassinated, so if you want to consider that older, but because he had been on the scene since the Montgomery bus boycott of the mid-50s, so now you're talking about a decade and a half almost. And he is not just speaking for himself, but for, as he said, the vast majority of the civil rights community in terms of defending Israel's right to exist, declaring Israel's right to live in peace with its neighbors. All of these things were just standard fare when it came to the civil rights community. Not only that, as you are aware, after he was killed, his friends and family started a Black Zionist organization in the mid-1975 called BASIC, Black Americans to Support Israel Committee, to further underscore that relationship, but also to push back on what was a growing anti-Zionist movement within, again, the more radical militant fringe of the Black civil rights community.
Khaled, when you know yourself that the Black Lives Matter movement as a political movement, I'm not talking about Black Lives Matter as a principle, but after the 2020 murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, you had probably for the first time in many decades a connection, a fusion between the Black American community on behalf of the political movement called BLM. They call themselves Marxist-Leninist, active Marxist-Leninist. Patrice Cullors and Elisa Garza, the leaders, call themselves, "We are trained Marxists." It's on, actually, you can go on to YouTube and just find that quote. And my question to Khaled, is as probably the leading Arab affairs and Palestinian affairs analyst in the entire Middle East, how do the Palestinian discourse understand this sort of fusion? It's a racial fusion, that they call from Ferguson to Palestine, as it were. The Palestinian discourse aware of this, or is this really an issue of the Palestinian Authority strategy?
Dan, I wouldn't say it's a Palestinian Authority strategy as much as it's an overall Palestinian approach or strategy, which is to exploit, to recruit, and weaponize minorities around the world against Israel. By going to these minorities, by going to the Black community in America, by going to other minorities around the world and telling them, look, we're also oppressed like you. And that's where they hope to find fertile soil among these people. And many of these people abroad, many of these minorities, they don't really understand the complexity of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and they're immediately dragged into this by sympathizing with the Palestinians, by turning against Israel. And that's always been a Palestinian strategy. It has nothing to do with the PLO. By the way, Hamas also does it. Other groups do it. The PFLP is very active on campuses, in communities around the world. And if you note, they always focus on minorities around the world. So it should not come as a surprise that, the Palestinians go to the Afro-American community and tell them, look, you are oppressed, you are suffering, we are also, facing the same problems, with the hope of finding common ground. And it does work in many times, because most people, as I said, they're well-meaning, but they don't really understand. And that's why the Palestinians have been successful to a certain extent in weaponizing some of these communities against Israel.
What is the Dumisani, picking up on what Khaled says, if we zoom out and create a broader strategic aperture, to use camera language, camera analogies, right, on the region, here you have Israel's foreign minister Eli Cohen goes to Sudan, Muslim majority country in Africa, Black Africa, and they see we're signing peace agreements. How does the Black American discourse, if you can shed light on that, make sense of all this?
One of the reasons why that's such a loaded question, Dan, is that it actually comments on the broader issue of the Black leadership in the United States and its view of Africa, right? One of the things we've shared often with Black leaders as we do our work in our organization is that as the pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel narrative became more and more normalized within Black academia and in certain parts of Black clergy, and I'm saying that like that because it's not so much the broader Black American community, but in terms of some of the leadership, there was less and less real concern for Africa. And this was not, I don't think it was planned on their part, but it was very much true. One of the things we point to, for example, is that the last time you could probably find a concerted effort of Black voices in concern for Africa would be Rwanda in 1994, right? Fast forward to now, there's a genocide in Nigeria, silence in the Black community. There's the slavery in Libya, silence, and on and on.
Why is there silence in the Black community on that?
Well, again, this is my educated guess, and as I've kind of assessed it, but over a number of years, and that would be, Dan, that as among other things, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict began to take center stage in terms of certain politics, particularly progressive politics within the Black community, there was less and less of a concern about other things in the region, right? It's, in other words, if you've picked a side, quote unquote, and the side is the Arab Palestinians against Israel, not even so much a nuance, let's work for peace, but more of a Israel is the aggressor and the oppressor, period, well, then it kind of short circuits the ability to speak to other things in the region that have nothing to do with Israel, like the genocide in Nigeria, right? Like the Coptic church being persecuted in Egypt and so on and so forth. In other words, it's almost as if a moral voice gets extinguished, because it's amazing how close it is to the United Nations. The United Nations Human Rights Council spends the lion's share of its time demonizing and delegitimizing Israel. And the same way, it almost virtually ignores all of these other human rights abuses. That same thing was reflected within the black leadership, speaking about Israel for some of that and that ilk, if you will, but ignoring virtually everything else that's going on in the region.
Khaled, when you hear Pastor Dumisani talk about the delegitimization of Israel, you and I are both Israelis. We share a love and a passion for our joint home here in Israel. How does that grab you? Does the Israeli-Arab community, as you know it and have lived it, feel part of that delegitimized issue? You know, when you hear people from the outside talking about the delegitimization, the demonization of Israel as, you know, oppressor and imperialist and genocide and all these crazy propagandistic terms.
You know, Dan, I think that the Arab Israelis, the Arab citizens of Israel, who are not Palestinians living in the West Bank and Gaza, are different. The 2 million Arabs living inside Israel as Israeli citizens are pragmatic. Okay, they're probably not Zionists, they're probably not Jews, but that does not mean that they are disloyal to Israel. And when Israel is attacked, these people who see themselves as Israeli citizens, they are also affected by that, because they hold the Israeli nationality, they hold Israeli passports, they travel abroad to different countries as Israeli citizens. And when they travel abroad and identify themselves as Israelis, people there do not distinguish between an Israeli Arab Muslim or Christian and an Israeli Jew. So the delegitimization of Israel affects all Israeli citizens, not only Israeli Jews. It's bad for the Arab community inside Israel. It's bad for all the non-Jews also living inside Israel. And as I said before, I mean, I'm a member of that minority, the Arab community inside Israel, and I consider myself to be a lucky Arab, that I was raised in Israel. I received the right education. Ironically, it was Israel that taught me, the Muslim, that Islam is a religion of peace, a religion of respecting other faiths, and a religion that is tolerant towards others. And that's why you look at the Arab community, the Arab Muslim community inside Israel, you see them to be the most moderate, pragmatic Muslims in the Middle East, in the entire Middle East. So the delegitimization of Israel is happening mostly from the Palestinian Authority and from Hamas and Islamic Jihad. But the good news is that the Israeli Arabs have not been involved in this, and they're not, or the majority of them are not involved in this, because it affects, or it goes against their own interests. The majority of the Arabs inside Israel are fighting for integration into Israel, while the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza are fighting for the exact opposite, which is separation. And you know what? I always say, if there is an Arab inside Israel who's not happy, who does not want to be part of Israel, he can move.
Yeah, Gaza. There's actually cheap real estate in Gaza.
Also in Jericho and also in Ramallah. And by the way, I did see many people move there, but not because they're attracted to the Palestinian democracy, and no, people move because it's cheap real estate, and for economic reasons, let's say. But these are the only reasons why they're moving. They're not moving because they feel persecuted. In fact, Israeli Arabs feel much more safe being or feel much safer being in Israel than they do in Ramallah or in Gaza. So that's the whole issue, that the delegitimization of Israel, which the Palestinian Authority is spearheading, by the way, these days, affects the Israeli Arabs. It affects all the citizens of Israel. It's bad for peace, and it sends the wrong message to Arabs around the world who want to normalize relations with Israel. I believe that the Abraham Accords are one of the most important things that have happened to Israel in the past 74 years, and I'll tell you why. I see it as the beginning of integrating Israel into the region. I see it as the beginning of a process to legitimize Israel in the eyes of Arabs and Muslims at a time when Israel has been delegitimized and even demonized for so many years. So that's the good news, that some Arabs are willing, notwithstanding this campaign, to come closer to Israel, and we see Sudan, we see other countries now signaling their intention to normalize relations with Israel. And that's what's worrying the Palestinian Authority and Hamas and other Palestinians, by the way.
Pastor Dumisani, you come with many groups of Black American leaders, other pastors, members of the community. Israel as a kaleidoscope nation, if you will. I mean, President Mandela, a blessed memory, used to call post-apartheid South Africa the rainbow nation. Mm-hmm. And when you come to Israel, do you see some of those same qualities as a kaleidoscope or a rainbow nation? And if so, is that message filtering or penetrating the hearts and minds of Black American visitors who come to Israel?
I have seen it over the years that it does resonate when Black pastors or the Black leaders come to Israel. And I've had the privilege of doing that over the years. One of the things that they look for is that almost intuitively, you're looking for a diverse group of people, right? And sure enough, we come to Jerusalem, I have so many different stories, not just Black pastors. I've had the opportunity to take a multi-ethnic group of pastors, Asian and Latino, and when they see Jews who look like them from literally all over the world, it is always, it always takes them aback, right? It's always fascinating. And it gives them a picture of Israel, obviously, that they otherwise never would have had, right? Whenever they thought Israeli Jewish person or even American Jewish person, whatever they saw in their minds when they came to Israel, unless they were around different groups, like maybe a Mizrahi community somewhere in the U.S., unless they were accustomed to that, it was very, very different for them to see. Not to mention to see Arab Christians, Arab Muslims, throughout in this very pluralistic society. And it's very, very powerful, Dan. It is something that when they see that type of diversity, that's just natural. It's organic, right? It's for the ones who are Christians, they think of the Bible, they think of the four corners of the earth, they think of those types of things. When they see it, it's like an America here in the Middle East, all these different ethnicities, different groups represented here in a democracy, living together. It's a very, very powerful image to them. And I've had pastors in the past think that when they've never been to Israel, they're thinking they're going to get off the plane and see bomb shelters and see just, desperate living situations, everything fighting and everything. When they're driving and they're seeing, stores and shops and people of all different it kind of blows them away when they see that. And I think it is very, very important for those reasons for them to come.
What do you think that Black American leaders should experience from an educational point of view in a deep dive into Israel when they come, as opposed to, you and I have talked for years about, coming to Israel in the Middle East as entertainment, but how about coming in as education in a very deep way?
So it was funny, especially last year, I've had multiple conversations with Black leaders, both in education and clergy. And we've been having the age-old discussion of Zionism as an inspiration to Black leaders for decades. Everyone from the Marcus Garveys to W.B. Du Bois. Before the state of Israel was even reborn, it was a rallying cry. Black people in the United States and other parts of the diaspora saw a cohesiveness of the Jewish people talking about a homeland and then seeing it reconstituted. That became the inspiration. I don't need to go through the whole thing. And Golda Meir, the foreign minister throughout Africa, and the inspiration that she engendered across the continent as they saw Israel rising up like a phoenix out of the ashes. Ghana, Kenya, right, these formerly colonized nations now beginning to move forward with Israel as a close ally and friend. It was the realization of something that Black leaders have been talking about for a while. So the reason I mention that is that when Black leaders come to the physical state of the Jewish state of Israel, right, we remind them that you are seeing the realization of a dream right? Now, Herzl's dream, the founding fathers of Zionism, the dream of a homeland for people who've been oppressed, who've been enslaved, who've been persecuted, all of those things, which is why it was such a parallel story in the United States, right? You often saw the Black and Jewish community come together. The NAACP, oldest civil rights organization in the world, founded by Black and Jewish Americans. I already alluded to Booker T. Washington, Julius Rosenwald, all these things long before Dr. King was born. You always had a common mindset and ethos that was there. Israel represents that. And this is why, Dan, as you know, one of the largest tourist groups that come here are people from Nigeria, right? Africans come to Israel, particularly pre-pandemic, in large numbers, both out of their inspiration. Many of them are Christians, so they're seeing Israel of the Bible, but also the inspiration of what Zionism is, this rallying cry for people who have been dispossessed to come together and build what Dr. King called an oasis in the oasis of brotherhood. So, and he said, he talked about it being rebuilt. He said, this is something that needs to be looked to and then modeled after.
You know, it's interesting, Khaled, we listened to Pastor Dumisani about talking about Zionism, the national liberation movement of the Jewish people back to sovereignty after 2,000 years out of the house. And yet when we talk about the relationship between African Americans, Africa, and the Arab Middle East, and as we say on our program, this is our Middle East, we don't hold secrets, we reveal everything. It hasn't been a completely smooth relationship historically. I mean, we know, even though it is not talked about, that the Islamic world used to deal in the slave trades. I mean, they brought Africans into slavery during the Islamic Empire, in the 700s and in the 800s after of the Common Era. So is there's a rub here, Khaled, isn't there, like between the Arab Muslim world and Africa?
Yes, there has been tension, and I have seen it in articles written in recent years. By some prominent Egyptian, Lebanese, and Algerian, Tunisian columnists criticizing Africa, saying, what's going on over here? Why are you normalizing relations with Israel? Why are you opening your countries to Israel? And who are you? It's this attitude that is a bit arrogant towards Africa. And I think that's one of the reasons why many Arab countries have lost the support of the African people or the people in Africa because of this arrogant or this attitude that is perceived as arrogant, as not being very sympathetic towards these people just because they have opened their countries to Israel. Look at the Palestinian Authority. They've established a special team to combat what they call Israel's attempts to penetrate the African continent. They're working very hard on it. Suddenly they woke up and they realized that, oh my God, we're losing Africa. So this is, something that is worrying them these days. And I think that, the people in Africa need to know who are your friends and who are your enemies. And I've met with many people, Africans who come here from the U.S., from elsewhere, and I've talked to them and I've seen how they come here with one perception and they leave with a totally different perception. After talking to an Arab Muslim like myself, after visiting Arab communities, after seeing Jews and Arabs working together, after realizing that this is not the state that we were told it is, there's no apartheid, there's no oppression, there's freedom of speech, freedom of the media. They see all these things and they go back with a completely different perception of Israel and of this whole conflict, that this is not the Middle East we thought it was.
And Dan, if I could just interject that too, what Khaled is saying, the Abraham Accords, and along with what he said before as well, has been such a powerful force that other African leaders have been inspired by it, right? Even those who have had good relations with Israel have wanted to go further, right? They see Israel making peace in the Arab world, which is mind-blowing for people who've been watching this for a very long time. And other African states are declaring things like, we're going to put our embassy in Jerusalem. We're going to, in other words, wanting to go even further, not even so much in a competitive thing, but being inspired by it, right? I've talked to several African and then Black American leaders as well who've been inspired by what they see and wanting to see Africa really continue to come to the table like they see the UAE and Morocco, and of course, like you said, Sudan. It is inspiring. It's a good thing, and I have hope that it's going to bring the regions together even more so.
Well, now we're going to tee up a secret. In others, we reveal secrets on Al-Shaq Al-Awsat Lana. I mean, our Middle East. We were revealing secrets all the time and creating context and perspective for our viewers and our listeners around the world, and I think primarily in the West, that they would not get from the mainstream media. They will definitely not get it from social networks. And here's the secret, and I know that Pastor Dumisani knows this because he's invited to the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs' first ever National Security Conference for Africa, the Arab world, and Israel. Where? In Jerusalem. So what Pastor Dumisani's been saying now, Khaled, and Khaled obviously as a senior fellow at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, will all be taking part in what has become an extraordinary and unprecedented conference. We have, at this point, 15 Arab countries, picking up what you're saying, Pastor Dumisani, who are coming to Jerusalem for the first time, March 27th, 28th, 29th, in another month and a half. And some of these countries do not even have formal diplomatic relations with Israel. So I'm excited sort of to talk about this because it picks up exactly on what you mentioned now, which is that the spirit of Abraham, and as I said to a friend in California, Abraham and Sarah, is filtering, that spirit is filtering into, it would be, it would be Abraham, Sarah, and Hagar. Because we have because Abraham's father Ishmael and his father of Isaac as well, and Muslims, Christians, and Jews, all of us, and in fact, Jerusalem, as I remember, Heinrich Bunting, the German theologian, has this famous. What they call the three-leaf clover, which is the logo of the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, with Jerusalem in the middle. That was a theological vision 500 years ago, and today, in 2023, the Common Era, it's coming true. I mean, it's actually happening. Can you imagine, both Khaled and Dumisani, that 15, and it'll probably be 20, by the time we get to March 27th, African countries will come to Israel exactly seeking assistance in food security, water security, and all kinds of other issues of national and human security. It really is something to behold. I'm interested in both of your views on this.
Very important initiative. Anything that empowers moderates and peace lovers and undermines the radicals and the extremists is a welcome approach, and I think the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, under your leadership, Dan, is now, about to do very important things to show everyone.
This is going to cost me $20. I know it's going to cost me $20.
And as you said, our goal is to show that this is our Middle East. We're not saying this is my Middle East, and that's different. So we're reaching out to everyone to come here, look at the situation. Let's all work together. Let's all be together, and let's not, be separated from each other. That's the only way to move forward. This is for the future of our children and the next generations.
I've been telling Black American and African pastors about this off the record, but now that it's on the record, yes, absolutely. So I have some pastors from South Africa, Rwanda, who may be joining us. They'll be reaching out to you because they want to be a part. I think that along with Israel itself as this pluralistic nation, one of the most amazing things that can happen is happening. Abraham Accords, what the JCPA is doing now, being the center. I keep thinking about Isaiah, all the nations flowing to Zion, right? And JCPA, Dan, echoing what Khaled is saying, under your watch here now, to launch something like this right as you're just coming in, right?
Yeah, 6 weeks.
Yes, sir. I mean, guns
I'm a
blazing.
newborn. I'm a newbie president.
And you're doing an amazing job, and congratulations again to you. It's well-deserved that you are now the president. Of course, the esteemed Dory Gold, who I still haven't met face-to-face, but of course know him by reputation. And his around the world, right, and especially in Africa, right, his name comes up and just nothing but high praise. So for you to continue that on, and for something like this to be among the first thing on your agenda, I think is extremely important. And again, like what Khaled is saying, it's so both for peace it's amazing. I will point out to some of the radical elements that I have to deal with sometimes in the States. I said, here you are toting an anti-Semitic, anti-Israel banner when the Arab world is making peace with Israel, when African nations are coming even closer to Israel. Said, so you're being marginalized by the times, whereas you are troping these anti-Semitic things, right? And you're also not helping the Palestinian people by attacking Israel. That's not helping them at all. Meanwhile, Israel's doing these amazing things. So now we're also pointing, and this is what the JCPA is doing. This is what's happening right there in Jerusalem. People want to be a part of that, but they want to be a part of something that's good, that's exciting, that's doing good things, right? So I think it's an amazing time, Dan.
Yeah, it's an amazing time for Jerusalem, and I think, Khaled Abu Toameh and I have been colleagues and friends for 30 years. I had the great honor of knowing Khaled's dad, Jamil, who was one of the great educators in Israeli Arab society. He ran the school system for the eastern side of Jerusalem. The Jordanian was a Jordanian curriculum at that time, and learned much from him. And Khaled and we had a shared vision of saying this is our Middle East. We want to share that notion of Israel as an indigenous country, not only the nation state of the Jewish people, but the nation state of the Jewish people, a kaleidoscope. We have wonderful citizens of Israel of Muslim descent, of Christian descent, Druze descent, Circassian descent. We have Baha'is. We really have the kaleidoscope of cultures in Israel, which is a Jewish majority culture country, but very blessed to have all these different cultures and peoples and ethnicities and histories living within Jerusalem, within Israel. This is what we want to share with the world. That's the purpose of our program, Our Jerusalem. So we invite the world to join us. And thank you, Pastor Dumisani Washington, the founder of the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, where we'll be having more intense discussions this week as you visit Jerusalem on your what we call the masterclass visit of one of the masters of education in the United States community, not just the Black American community, but the community at large, and the author of Zionism in the Black Church, a book that can be purchased on Amazon. Thank you both very much. My co-host, Khaled Abu Toameh, thank you. Shukran Azilan. And also you, Pastor Dumisani. It's a great honor. This is Dan Diker, and thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Al-Sharq Al-Awsat Lana, Our Middle East. Join us again next week. We'll look forward to seeing you and sharing the podium with you.